All right. Well, we are moving forward in Genesis. Last week, we talked about Jacob, kind of Jacob's story, particularly focusing on his story with his brother early on, his parents, and then ultimately with his wives and their children. And if you recall, there were a number of children that were born to Jacob. 12 precisely is that number that we are told of. And out of these 12, there were two in particular who were kind of singled out as special, the most special. And which ones were those? Yeah, Joshua. Joseph? All right, very good. And then who was the other one? That he really plays a passive role in this whole story. All right, Benjamin. Very good. And why in particularly were they singled out? Okay, they were Rachel's. You might think so, but why does the text tell us that they were singled out? Because the text actually, when it talks about through the story, never actually mentions Rachel. All right, these were the sons of his old age. And so I think there's a general idea, well, these are those sons that he had with Rachel, and so that's why they're special, that's why they're important. It's with the one that he really loves. Well, we talked about that last week. By the time Benjamin is born, is she really the one that he really loves? And I think you can call that into question, just based on the fact that she tried to name the child one thing, and he was like, no, I'm not doing that. Even though the women named every one of the children other than this one, he broke that tradition and said, no, I'm not letting you name my child the son of my sorrow. I'm going to change the child's name to the son of my right hand. So that's what he does. But these are the very last of his children, and that means that they are something very special to him. Children that were born in his, as he calls it, the children of his old age. That is, I think, just the last ones. These were kind of the babies of the family. And I guess I'll just ask this. How many of y'all were in a family and you were the last child? All right. You think, yeah, some of you weren't. Yes, that's accurate. I was not. How many of y'all felt like you got treated maybe just a little bit special because of it? Wow, you guys are being dishonest with with reality. I'm just going to say that right there. Yeah. I guarantee you that by the time Olivia's out of the house, she was going to spend the rest of her life, hopefully she'll realize that, yeah, she got a really good deal compared to some of the other ones, just by virtue of being the baby, being the last. And that's kind of a lot of the ways, I think, what you're seeing here with Jacob and the way that he's treating them. We know that Jacob especially loves Joseph and reveres him. Why? Does he do anything that demonstrates that? Does he give Joseph anything? Yeah? What you got, Joshua? All right, remember the story, the coat of many colors. Now, I will say, and I'm not asking anybody to change any coloring pictures or anything like that. That's a guesswork translation, just so you know. There's a lot of debate around what exactly is this. The Hebrew is kind of uncertain. The Greek translation of the Old Testament says that it was a coat with long sleeves, sleeves that go to the wrist. So whether it is quite literally a coat that has a lot of colors in it, which is a whole lot better, right, for children's stories and having them color the different colors and putting the rainbow on the coat and all of that good stuff. Whether that's legitimately what it was or not is almost irrelevant, though, right? What did the coat mean? All right, that he loved him. I think there was also some added significance. What was Joseph's job in the family? The tattletale, okay. All right. That's probably not what he would have written on his resume, when seeking jobs. But yes, we'll get there. Yeah, Kelly, what were you going to say the same thing? Oh, all right. All right. So, what would you call his job? What was his role? What did he do? Yeah, Kelly?
He ran errands for his dad and messages for his dad.
A little more than that. Well, what did his brothers do? Let me put it that way. Yeah, Lucy? All right, his brothers were shepherds. They're out in the fields doing all the work and everything, right? And what's he doing? Now, Kelly says running errands, and yeah, maybe there was some of that involved. But really, what's he doing? He's an overseer. He's their supervisor. He's the quality control guy. He's the guy that goes out to make sure they're doing their job right, which means that with all these kids, he's not doing what? He's not working. Whoever just said that was absolutely right. Thank you. Yes. That means all of his brothers are out there sweating, going through all the work, doing everything, and his job is to stay at home until his dad's like, okay, I need a report. You go out there, you check on them while they're out laboring, and you go with your, really spiffy jacket that you've got on, which, by the way, is meant to distinguish you from them. They know that they're grunt labor, and you have a coat that determines that you are over them. You are an overseer over them. And so he goes out, and look what you find in Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37 and verse 2. At the end of verse 2, what does he do? All right, he tattles on them. This goes to what Jonathan said just a few minutes ago. What's his job description? Tattletale. Yeah, very literally though, what does your translation say that he did? All right, he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now, there's really good indication, especially if you compare what you have here, the same thing shows up again, wording-wise, in Numbers chapter 13. Remember when the spies went up and they came back and gave a bad report to the people. But there's some kind of an indication, and a lot of people think that maybe this bad report was not a legitimate, they're doing a poor job, as much as it might be what? All right, Joseph kind of twisting the story at the end. Why might he do that? To get his brothers in trouble. How old is he? He's 17 years old. Can you see a 17-year-old who might take advantage of this kind of a situation and enjoy getting his brothers in trouble, presenting some kind of a bad report? There's a connotation to the language here that his report that he brings may not have been exactly truthful. And so there's that indication, at least with the language, a bad report. That's what this could really entail. So even if he is 100% honest in this evaluation, and he goes to his father and says, this is what they're doing, and it's a bad report, what's going to be the result of this? They hated him. I mean, come on. Your 17-year-old little brother, some of these guys, by this point in time, they have families of their own, right? They're adults. They have children, everything. Their 17-year-old brother is going back and telling these things that are making them look bad. And you notice kind of how all of this works. In verse 4, when his brothers saw their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him. They couldn't even bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. I mean, this isn't just a dislike. This isn't an annoyance. This is a seething hatred where you don't even want to acknowledge that a person even exists. That's where they are with Joseph, how much they just absolutely loathe him. And whose fault is all of this? This is on Jacob. Now, why would Jacob, why do you think that he would be such a poor father, showing such incredible favoritism towards one of his children that is going to create a relationship by which the others would want to actually kill him? Like father, like son, right? Isn't this just a replay of what we've already seen? It gets passed down. And you see that relationship. What happened with Jacob and Esau? Was that not a result of parents playing favorites almost against each other to the point that in the end, one of them wanted to kill the other one? This is what we're seeing. Things get passed down generation to generation. All right, so he has a couple dreams as well. Dreams play an important part in the narrative, the Joseph narrative. They start, Joseph has dreams. There's 3 different accounts of dreams, right? Y'all remember Joseph has his dreams. Who else has dreams in the story? Okay, Pharaoh is going to be the last one who has dreams, and then between those, y'all remember the other dreams? All right, the baker, the cupbearer for the king. They have dreams in prison. So you have kind of a breakdown of different sections of the narrative. Those different sections have dreams that kind of push the narrative along. And so the dreams here, we don't have the time to go into this much detail throughout. I'm trying to set up the relationship first. But he has dreams in which, first of all, it's grain that bows down to him, then the stars, the sun, the moon that bow down to him. And so he's given these dreams, and what does he do with them? All right, makes sure that he tells his brothers about it. Make sure that they know exactly what happened. And they're like, man, Joseph, I really appreciate that you've kind of told us what's going to happen and that eventually we're going to bow down to you, right? Is that kind of the attitude? No, he's just making things worse. It's already bad. And he's taking this and it's just kind of like, just ramming it in. You get the knife in and you twist it just a little bit. It's only infuriating them. So much so that as they're on the job and Joseph is sent out to them to run his quality control, to get a report that's probably going to be bad coming back, whatever the case, as he goes out to them from a distance, he is noticed. How do you think they noticed this guy so easily from a distance? All right, because of his robe. He's wearing a very unique outfit, whether it's multicolored, the long sleeves, whatever the case. It's a robe that is meant to distinguish him. And that's exactly what it does. And so, as he is even a distance away from them, he sends him off. And verse 18, chapter 37, verse 18, they saw him at a distance before he'd reached them, and they plotted to kill him. Verse 19, they said to one another, here comes what? All right, here comes that dreamer. He had a dream. All right, let's see his dream get fulfilled if we kill him. Notice where we've got to in this narrative now. The brothers are there. They are to the point that they want him dead. And they're willing to do it themselves. So he comes up upon him. They throw him in a pit in order to kill him in that way. Verse 20, so now come on, let's go and let's throw him into one of the pits, and then we can say a vicious animal ate him. And we'll see what happens to these dreams. Now Reuben, we know, wants to help him out, and I don't think this is because Reuben's necessarily a really good guy or a really good brother. I think this actually ties back to something that Reuben has done, and we won't go into detail on exactly what that is, but he has made himself odorous before Jacob. Basically, he tried to make a power play in Jacob's house, and it failed. And so he is demoted because of that, and I think he's trying to find ways to get back into Jacob's good graces. I think that's why, that's the motivation behind Reuben wanting to save Joseph's life. I don't think that it's because he's such a good guy. That's not the Reuben narrative in Genesis. He's not presented that way, and he won't continue to be presented that way throughout the story. All right, so Reuben tries to save him, so they don't kill him. Reuben wants to bring him out of the pit, but he's not going to get a chance to do that. Instead, what do? Okay, they sell him off to a group of traders who are coming through. Verse 25, it says they sat down to eat a meal, which, by the way, this is one of the coldest verses in the Bible. Because we know, not too long after this, Joseph's going to tell us, what is Joseph doing at this point? Anybody know? He's yelling and screaming for them. And he says he cried out to them when they put him in. And what are they doing as their brother is crying out, screaming, and yelling? They're sitting down to eat. I don't know if any of y'all have ever murdered somebody before. I'm guessing probably not. But if you've done something bad, do you ever have a time in which you just have guilt that makes it to where you don't really feel like eating? Anybody ever felt a kind of guilt where you're just like, I couldn't eat a thing right now? Whatever you're doing, it's that bad. The last thing that you want to do is sit down and eat a meal, which indicates they hate Joseph so much. There's no guilt involved. He is screaming in the background, yelling from the pit, wanting them to release him. And they're like, hey, will you pass the mustard? Can you see this picture? Just how cold these people are. No guilt, no remorse, no thought, nothing at all. They just move on with their life. And so Judah is the one who stands up, and Judah very specifically sees, these people who are coming. And so verse 26 says, what gain do we have if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. Who's Ishmael again? Yeah. Not the son of Isaac. Very close, though, Joshua. He's Isaac's brother, right? Remember, Abraham's son, Isaac's half-brother? So in other words, this is kin. This goes back to the Isaac and Ishmael power struggle, that now he's being sold to the Ishmaelites. And if we were doing a really deep dive into this, I would have you kind of take note of the various things that these traders were actually taking with them and trading. Let's see. Anyway, they took him out, the Midianites traders, they passed by, pulled Joseph out of the pit. They sold him 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. So why would they do that instead of killing him? Don't they want him dead? Yeah, Kathy? Okay, say that again.
I don't know if they want him dead as much as they just want him gone. And they see that maybe they can get a little profit out of this if they sell him.
Okay, all right. I would say they probably still want him dead. So why would they then do this? Yeah, Jeff?
Well, do you think it would be just insult on two? Because they know the Ishmaelites, and they know that they're not a favored people. So is it more insult to injury?
Okay. All right. Yeah, Kelly?
They literally said, what's the profit if we just kill him?
Yeah.
So they're saying, let's make some money off of this while we're at it.
All right. And what's the assumption, though?
He's as good as dead.
Yeah. The lives of slaves, they didn't have a long life expectancy. Typically speaking, a slave is going to go into mines or into fields or someplace. They're going to be heavily burdened. They're going to die young. I mean, that's the life expectancy. For them, he's as good as dead. They're basically killing him by putting him into slavery. He's going to end up dying, and they get a little bit of profit too. By the way, what I was looking for is in verse 25, the camels were carrying aromatic gum, balsam, resin, going down to Egypt. And if we were going through a deep dive, I would say kind of tuck that away in the back of your mind, because that might come up again somewhere within the story. All right, we're skipping over chapter 38. We don't necessarily need to go into all of that, although there's some really, really interesting stuff. Yeah, it'll probably come out in a sermon at some point. But the end of the whole thing in chapter 37, what do these brothers do with his coat? Okay, they rip the coat off of him. They kind of shred it. And then as Joshua said, they put blood on it and they give it to the father so that he assumes what? He's dead. Look, they're like, hey, isn't this Joseph's coat? We found this and it has blood on it and it's shredded. And he's like, yes, it is. But what you find at the end of chapter 37, I don't think they thought very far ahead. Because what was his reaction? Around verse 34. All right, Jacob tore his clothes. He put sackcloth around his waist. He mourned for many days. And all of his sons and daughters they tried to comfort him, but he would not be comforted. This is going to leave a lasting impression in their minds. We know that because it's going to come up again later. I don't think they quite realized what their temporary enjoyment that they would have in getting rid of Joseph, I don't think they thought beyond that to think, well, how is this going to affect others? How is this going to affect our father? I think they completely underestimated the ripple effects moving out, and they weren't prepared or ready for what it actually did to him. So, Joseph goes down, and he is sold to whom? Yeah, Joshua. You got it? Okay, excellent. Yeah, Anna Lee, did you know? What's that? Okay, well, he was taken by merchants, that's right, down to Egypt and sold to the captain of the guards, Pharaoh's captain of the guard, named Potiphar. So we get into chapter 39. Joseph is down in Egypt. An Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guards, bought him from the Ishmaelites. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, serving in the household of the Egyptian master. All right. Now, we're going to see exactly who this captain of the guards is in just a little bit. But what we know is that the captain of the guard is for Pharaoh's personal bodyguard, personal place, jail, all of that is run by this guy. In other words, Joseph kind of hits the lottery to some degree as far as slaves go in being placed under somebody who is in a very, very high position. I mean, very high. And so he is going to work in this individual's house. He's not in a mine somewhere. He's not out in the fields. He's working within somebody's house, and the Lord is with him, which is really important. In other words, he's going to do well, and he excels in what he's doing, so much so that the story tells us what kind of trust did Potiphar eventually place in Joseph. All right, made him head of the household. In fact, what he's going to say is that when it comes to, dividing what I am over, I have my work and I have my home life. He's like, and I got to the point, I don't even think about my home life anymore, whether my house is taken care of, it's run correctly, the things. I have somebody over it that I trust so much that I don't even give him a second thought. He doesn't even need an overseer. He is just on the same level of authority as I am, just underneath me, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea. That's the position that Joseph ends up having. And Potiphar, he doesn't even worry about that. He focuses over here in his job life. And so not only does Joseph kind of hit the lottery, Potiphar, I think, feels like he has completely hit the lottery. This is as good as it possibly can be for him. Who else kind of thought that maybe they hit the lottery with Joseph around? All right, yeah, Potiphar's wife seemed to kind of think that as well. What does she do? Hold on, Joshua. Let's give some other people a chance here, okay, buddy? Because you are totally knocking them out of the park. You're doing a great job. But we're gonna see if we can get some of these older folks to answer some of these too, and see if they can do as well as you can. I said that they're not talking because they're like, we've got Joshua as a mouthpiece. What do we want to answer for? Yeah, Jeff?
She tries to seduce him.
Okay. Yeah, she comes up to him and attempts to try to get him to lie with her. And what's his response? All right, he says no. And yet, you see this here in verse 8, what we were saying a second ago. With me here, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. He's put all that he owns under my authority. No one in the house is greater than I am. He's withheld nothing from me except you, because you're his wife. How could I do this immense evil? How could I sin against whom? Against God. Doesn't that seem a little out of place? Because he's like, Potiphar's done this. He's put me in charge. He's put everything under my care. Everything except for you. How could I do this? You would think, how could I do this against my master Potiphar? That's what you would anticipate based on everything that he led up, right? Why does he say, how could I do this and sin against my God? Well, hold on, Joshua. I'm gonna let wheels turn before we answer this one. What do you guys think? Yeah, Kelly?
To directly answer your question, there must have been some prohibition in the, what they call that, the patriarchal law against sleeping, against adultery.
Okay.
But I was thinking of something else.
Okay.
I was thinking it's interesting that there was one thing Adam wasn't supposed to do.
Yeah?
He wasn't supposed to eat the tree of good, knowledge of good and evil. And here's one thing Joseph's not supposed to do. And this time he doesn't do it. And good things happen.
Yeah.
Instead of Adam doing the one bad thing and the world literally coming crashing down.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great observation. Because you see that connection. And so, yeah, it's kind of what Kelly said. What was the first thing that you said?
Something in the patriarchal law against adultery.
Yeah, okay, because it was the wrong thing to do. I mean, there's a moral law that's out there. You don't need to have words written on a tablet somewhere to know that it's wrong to take somebody else's wife, right? I mean, that's generally understood. There's a moral law that is built within us that says that's not right. And so he understands this moral law, this idea. This comes from God. And, maybe you can find a connection with what Paul says when you're doing what you're doing work-wise, your job. Who's really ultimately your boss? It's God, right? And you recognize that. Do your work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And so there is that recognition. Go ahead, Joe.
I was actually just thinking about that. In our lives today, we set examples for those around us, and in our workplace, when we're setting a positive example, people will take notice, and when we're focused on God, we don't have to, as in Joseph's case, we don't have to physically say that we're doing things for God's honor, but it really does fall back on God, as in Paul, or as Paul does say. But here with Joseph, even though it may fall back on Potiphar, it ultimately is against God.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this is going to be a good point of comparison when we eventually, at some point, talk about Psalm 51. So, tuck that away. Joseph, who says, "How could I do this thing and sin against you?" That's going to make a difference. But we'll save that until we talk about David. It'll be a while. All right, so we get back here to Joseph, and she says to him, "Well, I can respect that, and I understand. So you do your thing, and we'll just call it from there, right?" No, is this a one-time thing? No, day after day, she keeps trying, until suddenly he walks in one day. Where are all the servants? They're not there. It's just him and her. And what does she do? Yeah, Anna Lee, what were you going to say? Yes. All right. And she lied. Very good. That's exactly right. So, she corners him, grabs him, he wiggles out of his jacket, runs away, and then, how does she handle that situation? Yeah, verse 12, she grabbed him by his garment, but leaving his garment in her hand, he escaped, ran outside. When she saw that he had left the garment with her, had run outside, she called her servants. "Look," she said to them, "my husband brought a Hebrew man to make fools of us. He came to me so he could sleep with me, and I screamed as loud as I could. When he heard me screaming for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside." There are multiple ways of understanding this. She could be saying, "Oh no, look what happened." I don't think that's what she's doing. I think she's saying, "Everybody gather up. Here's the story." I think she is making sure that everybody understands the same thing, that it was just the two of them. This Hebrew slave tried to make sport of her. She yelled. That's when they all came in to save her, so he ran away, and he left his garment there as proof. Can you see what I'm saying? It's not that she's saying, oh no, this happened. She's saying, does everybody have the story straight? Because when my husband comes home, we all need to be on the same page. Does that make sense? So, the husband comes home, and it's really interesting the way that, verse 16, she put Joseph's garment beside her until his master came home, and she said the same story, right? She said, here's the story. So she says the same story. The Hebrew slave you brought to us came to make a fool of me. When I screamed for help, he left his garment beside me and ran outside. And when his master heard the story, his wife told him, these are the things your slave did to me. He was furious, and he had him thrown into prison where the king's prisoners were confined. So Joseph was there in prison. Yes, Kelly.
Sorry, this is kind of a digression, and there's probably not a real answer. I've just always wondered, it seems like given that he was a slave, this could be punishable by death.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that he didn't do that, do you think that means he perhaps didn't believe it?
All right, let's go down that path, because that's the path we're going down. It says he was furious. Does it tell us at whom? No. Who is he probably furious at? His wife. I don't think he's mad at Joseph, and I think Kelly's exactly right. He's a slave, and this guy is way high up, right? I mean, he has all kinds of power. He doesn't have to, in any way, shape, or form, give an answer for having one of his servants killed. He doesn't have to. He's the captain of the guards themselves, right? I mean, just get rid of him. And any man in here, if somebody did this to your wife and you had that power and you didn't have, a lot of the constraints that maybe some of us have, wouldn't you have a rage, a furious rage within you that throws someone in prison? No. The full extent of your power, I think Kelly's exactly right. He would just simply have Joseph killed, which lends me to believe, exactly as Kelly said, he didn't for 1 second buy this story. Why not, do you think? Because this probably is not the first time this has happened. This probably isn't the first servant that she has seduced. There's probably a history that's happened of her making sport of their various servants, but now you have one that stands up and says, no, I won't do this. And oh, by the way, this just happens to be the one that what does Potiphar think of him again? That he really likes him? Yeah, if they had sliced bread, this would have been the best thing since sliced bread, right? This is the greatest thing to have ever happened in his life, to where he can just say, you know what, I don't even care what happens with taking care of all the stuff in my house and everything. You do that. You can see him just furious because he has to do something about this. All of the guards and his wife are presenting a claim, and he can't just simply ignore it. Everybody is together on this. This is what happened. All the other servants, everybody, he can't just sweep it under the rug. He has to do something. And so he's furious at her that she's cost him the best thing that he's ever had in his house. So he throws him in prison. Yeah, Jan? Okay, say that into the mic here in just a second.
It's interesting that a coat is used in the lie again.
Yeah, you're getting ahead of me, which is great. Yeah, and so you do see a garment. So pay attention to that, because Most people I go through the story with, they don't pick up on that right away. So that's actually really good. But you see various garments that are in use throughout the story. So Joseph is now put into prison. And by the way, what does this prison have to do with this captain of the guard? Yeah, this is the prison that the captain of the guard was over, basically. This is kind of Potiphar's, it's part of his realm, what it is that he has to handle, what he has to deal with. Why would he throw Joseph in there? Yeah, if I can't have him at home, I'll at least put him here and let him do the job here. And does he? He kind of does, doesn't he? He puts him in charge of all the other prisoners. And so here Joseph is finding himself in this thing. All right, we need to start picking up the pace just a little bit. We get into chapter 40. In chapter 40, we have the two dreams. Remember these dreams? You had the baker, the cupbearer. The baker, he had the 3 baskets of bread. The birds came and ate them all away. You had the cupbearer who had the 3, luscious vines of grapes, the clusters that he was able to squeeze out the juice and presented to the king. And they said, "What does this mean?" And he says, "Well, here's the deal. In 3 days," he tells the cupbearer, "in 3 days, the 3 clusters of grapes, that means 3 days, and then you presenting it to the king means he's going to restore you to your place." And then the baker's like, "Oh, sweet, nice." Actually, let me make sure that I put this correctly. He told the cupbearer, "You will be lifted up," I think is what it is. You will be lifted up to your place once again. And so the baker hears, he's like, "Oh man, this is fantastic. I want to hear what my dream means." And so he tells him, "Oh, well, that means the 3 baskets of bread in 3 days. What's going to happen? Your head will be lifted up off of you," is the way that it is. And so you have that kind of play on words going on there between the 2 different dreams. And the birds are going to eat at your flesh, and that's not what he wanted to hear. But you have at least these dreams, and you see what Joseph tells them. Let's see, in verse 18, well, that's where he tells him, hold on, verse 14, "When all goes well for you, remember that I was with you. Please show kindness to me by mentioning me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews. Even here I've done nothing that they should put me in the dungeon." All right, so what do we see about Joseph here? Okay, he is able to interpret dreams, but there's something in that statement. What's going on with Joseph? What's he still want? He wants to go home. Maybe in his mind, he's heard the stories or has known about his grandfather. Is it grandfather or is it great-grandfather? Let's see. His father, Jacob, Isaac, his great-grandfather, who, when Lot was taken, what did Abraham do? He rescued him. Took 600 of his own fighting men, went off, fought King Chedorlaomer, got them and brought them back. You think maybe in his mind, he's like, I know that my father loves me more than Abraham loved Lot. He's not going to stop. He's not going to rest until he comes. And has he come? No. It hasn't happened yet. And I think maybe he's still holding out hope. There's still a desperation. He still wants to be home. That's still in the back of his mind. There's that desperate longing, and he says, I shouldn't be here. This isn't fair. I've done nothing to deserve any of this. I just want to go home. And that's where we see him At the end of this chapter, verse 23, did the cupbearer remember Joseph before Pharaoh? No. Not for how long? 2 years. All right, 2 years. And then the Pharaoh has a dream. Again, we don't have the time to go through the dreams. You know, you had the cows and the stalks and all of that with the puny cows eating up the fat cows, and nobody's able to figure out exactly what it means. And who remembers what it means? Or who remembers someone who might be able to tell them? All right, the cupbearer. Why do you think the cupbearer was hesitant to bring up Joseph? Okay, the other guy died. Yeah. All right, he must have. All right. Yeah, he must have done something that put him into jail in the first place. And that's a jail that the Pharaoh himself would have put him in, right? I mean, that's what would, and maybe there's a hesitancy in him to say, hey, Pharaoh, remember when I did that thing that you threw me in jail for? You know what I mean? Like just a reminder of the case. We don't know, but I mean, he does at least, kind of give that impression. But when he tells him about this Hebrew slave, and so verse 14, the Pharaoh sent for Joseph. They quickly brought him from the dungeon. He shaved, changed his clothes, and he went to Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said about you that you can hear a dream and interpret it. Was he able to do so? Yes. He's able to tell him exactly what it means. They're going to have 7 years of just, bountiful stuff, and then 7 years of famine. And, verse 33, he says, so now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and a wise man and put him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and appoint overseers over the land. Take a fifth of the harvest of the land of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather the excess food during these good years that are coming under Pharaoh's authority. Store the grain in the cities so that they may preserve it as food. The food will be a reserve for the land during the 7 years of famine that will take place in the land of Egypt, so the country will not be wiped out by the famine. This proposal pleased the Pharaoh, and Joseph was like, you just got to find someone that you trust, someone who's wise, someone that you think is going to be able to do this job adequately. And what's the Pharaoh's response? You. I haven't seen anybody else who's been able to tell me what you've been able to tell me. Obviously, you are the guy for the job. So, verse 37, the proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. He said to them, can we find anyone like this, a man who has God's Spirit in him? So Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there's no one as discerning and wise as you. You will be over my house, and all my people will obey your commands. Only I, as king, will be greater than you. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, see, I'm placing you over all the land of Egypt. Does this sound familiar? Being placed into a position of full authority that's equal to, or just under. We've seen this, right? So verse 42, Pharaoh removed the signet ring from his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, clothed him with fine linen garments, placed a gold chain around his neck, and he had Joseph ride in the second chariot, and servants called out before him, make way. So he placed him over all the land of Egypt. Verse 46, how old is Joseph now? 30. How old was he at the beginning of our story? 17. It's been a couple years, right? He's gone from the 17-year-old boy. He's been through a lot. And now he is 30 years old as he is starting his brand new life. I want to talk about his sons. We're not going to finish the Joseph narrative tonight, but I do want to at least talk about his two sons. Verse 50, they found a wife for him. He was married, verse 50. 2 sons were born to Joseph before the years of the famine arrived. Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph named the first one Manasseh. Does anybody have something that tells you what Manasseh means, or at least kind of what it sounds like? All right, to make someone forget. Why would he choose to name his child making someone forget? What does it say right there? What has God allowed him to forget? Yeah, he's on the other side. He's come out of the pit, and now he's here. And he says, you know what? I've got a brand new life. I have a brand new life. I've got a beautiful wife, and I have a beautiful little baby. And I'm starting all over, right here, right now. My father, gone. My brothers, don't care. He has no desire to go back to them. That connection is now severed, and it's gone. Do you think at this point, in these 7 years, in this time, do you think if he really desired to take a trip up there, he could have at any moment that he wanted to? Absolutely. Does he? No, because he has forgotten them. He's built a wall up in his mind that hides all of those emotions that are there. It's a concrete wall, the bricks are up, and everything about that life is stored away. It's forgotten. I'm moving forward. I have a brand new life. And then he has another son. What's the name of the second son? All right, the second son he named Ephraim. Do you have a note about that one? All right, has this idea of fruitfulness. In other words, he says, I have forgotten everything from behind. Right now, I'm focused on how bright the future looks. The fruitfulness. Now, not the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's done. That's finished. I have nothing to do with that anymore. Now it's my own line. In my new place, in my new life, in my Egyptian way of life. This is now what matters, and I am moving forward in fruitfulness. Can you see his psyche now? Does he still have that longing to return? That this isn't fair, I want to go back, I want my father? It's all gone. He's forgotten that, and he's moving forward in fruitfulness. This is a brand new chapter. And then what happens next week? That's right, Jason. That wall comes down. But that's for next week. All right, any comments or questions as we kind of cut it, our story right here? It's a really good place to stop.